Fresh off the back of an electric 2021 season, F1 enters a new era once more by going back to the late 1970s with ground effect cars, porpoising, and almost zero coverage to speak of at the test. Welcome back to the Grid Talk podcast. Hosting today will be me, Owain Medford, and joining me are Steve Jackson from Formula Shakedown.
Good morning.
Tom Downey from Everything F1.
Good evening.
And Aaron Harper from the Five Red Lights podcast.
Good evening.
Today we'll be sort of reacting and analysing the first pre-season test of 2022, formerly named the pre-season session, so they don't have to cover it with the TV, at the Circuit de Catalunya. So be sure to like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Formula One Grid Talk, and then ring the bell icon so you're notified of future shows going forward, particularly what promises to be quite an exciting season. My plan for the episode really is to go sort of through from in constructors winning order from last year, and I'm completely disregarding times because I don't care, because they mean nothing and you can't really get anything out of them, and even if they did, they're all within about 3 seconds of each other right now, which I'm sure setup will sort out by the time we're actually turning a wheel in anger. I'm going to start with Mercedes at 393 laps, and I'm going to throw it to you, Aaron. I don't know how much you've seen of the test, but it's sort of quite, bearing in mind that Mercedes didn't seem to sort of get too many laps in over the 3 laps. They've got the sort of second highest lap figure. I don't know if you noticed that, but do you think it's sort of, I don't know, do you think it's happy running for the Silver Arrows, or do you think there's more to do, bearing in mind their car looks quite underdeveloped in comparison to some of the others?
I think they're in a decent position. They did a fair number of laps on the first day, and then they did not quite so many on the second day, but yesterday, day 3, they did quite a lot of running with George and Lewis. I think they were top of the lap count for that day. So I think they've ended up second behind Ferrari in mileage in terms of laps completed. So I think they'll be fairly happy with what they've done. I mean, the car, compared to some of the others, does look fairly undeveloped, but then there is something to be said for sort of understanding your initial baseline, so where they think the car should be in terms of its development and what they've actually designed, and then they'll know the correct avenue to go down, because there's no point throwing stuff on it now and not really understanding what's influencing what. And considering we haven't had ground effect cars since, well, none of us were here last time they had ground effect cars, there's a lot to learn. So obviously the porpoising issue is something that they've got to get a hold of, and that's just all the teams as well. But in terms of Mercedes, I think they looked good. They ran mostly long on the first day. They did a little bit of work in terms of setup changes the second day from what I saw. And they were one of the few teams to do a proper long run in the wet on Friday, which could actually bear some fruit for them if there's a wet race early in the season, because they'll understand their car pretty well in that respect. But really, it's just about getting laps under the driver's belt, and obviously settling George into the team, even though he's not that new a face. So I think they're in a decent position, and they're not 8-time world champions for no reason. So I'd trust them to know what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It seemed like Mercedes can probably engineer their way out of the porpoising problem. Apparently they are one of the worst. Eyewitnesses are saying that they're one of the worst affected. But as has been said, Mercedes are quite good with suspension. I'm sure they'll work it out. Now, we've got the Red Bull next, Steve. 358 laps, 206 for Max Verstappen and 152 for Sergio Perez. That was stopped short a bit by a gearbox issue. But sort of what are your thoughts maybe on how aggressive some of the parts of the Red Bull look, particularly in comparison to the Mercedes? It almost looks like Red Bull, even though they pushed so hard last year, have managed to sort of really maximize the regulations as far as we can tell.
Yeah, it's almost like Red Bull and Mercedes have looked at opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to testing the grey areas that they can exploit. There's not so many of them this year, but the Red Bull just looks, it's a typical, very aggressive Adrian Newey design. It's very uncompromising, and he's well known for designing cars that are sort of designed to go very, very quickly and not be unfavourable to drive, but just require a fairly particular sort of driving style, which is where I think Max comes in. Besides Checo's gearbox problem, I think they had a relatively hassle-free 3 days of not testing testing. I don't know what we're calling this, but it sounds like they got through their run plan and that they're quite happy with what they've found so far. From what I understand, they are bringing a fairly revised package to Bahrain for the actual test, so I'd be interested to see what that entails. It may have been something that they weren't sort of planning on doing until they saw what other teams are doing, and they may have noticed a couple of things that they've possibly missed. It is possible that they want to try. So one thing that I did notice with the Red Bull, in terms of the very limited footage that we've seen, I think this applies for most cars anyway, but for the Red Bull especially, it moves around a lot, especially in a couple of the high-speed shots I saw of it. It sort of describe it maybe as a wee bit oversteering, and whether that's them trying to get around the porpoising issue with slightly different suspension stiffness or whatever it may be, I'm not too sure, but it's going to be quite fun to watch, I think, if that's the sort of movement we can expect with these cars at high speed. But yeah, like there's not really been any major complaints out of the Red Bull camp. Max seems pretty content with the whole thing. Checo didn't really have any complaints. I'm not concerned at all about the gearbox issue because this is testing, or well, it's not testing, but it is. So really, you'd expect teams to have these sort of interruptions in their run plan, not interruptions to the level that like Haas and Alfa Romeo had, but there will be sort of contingencies in there just in case something goes slightly wrong. So yeah, at this stage, I think they completed something in the region of 350 odd laps, 358. So yeah, they've had plenty of running, and I'm more curious to see what that car looks like at Bahrain, because I think that might be more representative of what they actually plan on running in the first few races.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, we're sort of seeing changes that the team's having to make, bearing in mind, we've got some phenomena that we haven't seen in a long time. Speaking of phenomena that we haven't seen in a long time, Tom, is Ferrari with topping the mileage charts with 439 laps. That's a good something like 10% over the next nearest Mercedes. It kind of looks like the Scuderia are serious this year. Like it almost looks like a reversal of 2009 when we had those big changes where they've kind of, obviously they haven't had to do a title fight, and they've been able to really focus on this car. It's looking good for them, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this sort of ties on to the progress they're making in 2021, because 2021 was very much the year of the rebuild of Ferrari, and obviously because we knew we had these regulation changes coming up for this upcoming season. I think much like some of the other teams on the grid, they focus a lot of their attention onto the development of this year's car, because whilst there's obviously the aerodynamic side of it, Ferrari have had to effectively make up or find that power deficit they lost in the power unit. Plus, obviously, it's going to be packaged differently because it's a different, the cars are so inherently different this year. But the initial signs are quite promising. And I'm not particularly a Ferrari fan. We all know I'm a Max Verstappen Red Bull fan and quite a big McLaren fan. I would like to see Ferrari have a proper fight back at the top. We saw glimpses of it last year, and I for one was certainly very, very much underestimating them or underpraising them last year. So I think if we can see in 2022 a sort of good fight from them with McLaren, or maybe sort of even beginning to nip at the heels of the top two, or maybe even if they pull somewhat of a brawn in 2009. Now, obviously, they've been around for donkeys here, so so it wouldn't be like, obviously it's not a completely new team, but if they can basically just turn up, throw down an Uno reverse card, and then just come out with pole position and then P1-2 in the race, in the first race of the season, I don't think too many people will be complaining apart from McLaren.
Yeah, it almost looks like a Ferrari resurgence of the 90s, both with the livery of the car. And the performance is actually quite promising and potentially a little scary depending on what colour team gear you wear. The other side of the other team that was really affected by 2008 was McLaren. They're next up. The 365 laps, Aaron. Bearing in mind, is that good enough? Is sort of has their testing performance been good enough to sort of warrant any sort of hope for the season? Like they need to be moving forward. They missed out on fourth in the championship last year. Third in the championship last year. Is this the step that takes them forward?
Well, that's what we're all hoping for, and obviously we want McLaren and Ferrari to join the two at the top and make it a bit more of a four-way scrap, which would be incredibly interesting. But I think it's been a successful test for McLaren, because if you think back a few years, they were barely getting down to the end of the pit lane with the old GP2 engine, and then they had the Renault, which was slightly underpowered. Of course, now they've got the Mercedes, and that car would have been tailored this year to fit the Mercedes properly, a bit unlike last year. And the car, from what I've seen, has looked well balanced. It looks fairly quick. They look in somewhat of the same order as last year. And obviously, McLaren topped the first day of testing with Lando. Obviously, we can't really look into times too much. And considering that it's not been a televised thing, we can't really see too much. We're relying on reporters on the ground and stuff. But I haven't really heard anyone say that McLaren are suffering from any problems as much as anybody else. So the porpoising like Mercedes and Alfa Romeo have been, but then they haven't been quite as stunningly quick as other teams. So they may be kind of in a bit of a no man's land, but they will be crunching the data, and they've got some good people there. So they'll be well onto that. And again, like I said about the Mercedes team, it's about getting laps in this new car for Lando and Daniel. And I'm pretty sure we'd have heard about it if McLaren were unhappy with what they were doing or how things were going. It's almost a case of no news is good news for McLaren, because we all terrifyingly remember that every red flag was caused by a McLaren Honda breaking down or falling off the side of the track. So for this group of engineers to be developing a car, they need a firm baseline. And that's what this test is all about, really, for all of the teams. And considering that McLaren haven't had a technical failure, that is, a big tick for them. They'll be very pleased with that. It means they can do their run plan as designed and get the relevant data.
Yeah, as you say, that's hugely important. It's almost good to have an uneventful testing. You don't want people to notice you. You just want to have a decent lap count like they do have. Going into the opposite end of that spectrum is Alpine, Steve, which is obviously there were rumours of a sort of hydraulic problem running all through the first day and a half, sort of, and then they had the worst start possible. Like how concerned will they be in Paris at what's happened with the test so far?
For a betting man, I'd say very. Although that's just from the outside looking in. It was it's been a really weird sort of few days for them. The hydraulic issue you mentioned, I think, is linked to the hydraulic leak that caused Fernando's car to catch fire on Friday morning. So I'm not sure if that was part of our plan. If it was, I'm not too sure what the agenda is there. But yeah, not a fantastic test. They had some DRS issues. I don't think they actually were able to employ DRS in any actual sort of representative testing, so any long runs or qualifying runs or that sort of thing. So that is something that I'm factoring into this. So no DRS, obviously no idea about fuel loads. One other thing, I think it was Mark Hughes pointed out, because he's been there for all 3 days, he noted that the Alpine sounds audibly low on revs compared to everyone else. It's hard to do a direct comparison because there's no other Alpine power units besides the ones in the back of the Alpine. So it's tricky to sort of get a handle on whether that's them running it at a slightly reduced power just out of concern, or whether this new turbo arrangement doesn't need the engine to rev as high as it usually would. I'd sort of bet on the former rather than the latter. But yeah, really bizarre testing. Fernando gave, reasonably good feedback by the sounds of it. Esteban really drew the short end of the story, got no testing in on Friday at all after the fire, and I think they only completed something in the region of 266 or so laps. Let me just double check. Yeah, 266 laps. So quite down on sort of the top 5 teams. I mean, Red Bull 358, McLaren 367. For a team that is trying to move forward, even though they're still aiming only for 5th in the championship this year, that's not a good start. I'd be curious to see what they do in Bahrain to try and get around these issues, or whether these issues are representative of just a wider problem with an Alpine, which we know has had some fairly bizarre managerial restructuring and just a bit of inside controversy, which obviously takes away from the important part, which is the on-track stuff. So yeah, it's not looking particularly good at the moment. But again, I'd rather see them have these problems now than, first weekend of the championship. And, they're a team that rightfully deserve to be further up than where they are. I think they've definitely got the personnel. I would say they've got the drivers, especially in Esteban. We know he's quite capable. Fernando, we know what he's capable of, but he's also getting on a bit. I don't think he's part of Alpine's long-term plan. But yeah, it's a bit of it looks a bit flaky, but I'm not reading too much into it at the moment because, again, this really was just a shakedown session for all these teams before we get into the proper stuff in Bahrain. So yeah, the only thing I'm not too sure on is this cooling arrangement that they're running, because the show car, or not show car, that they had a very complex set of levers along the side pod, along the top of the side pods and sort of further back towards the Coke bottle area. They were all covered up, and yeah, it's quite cold in Barcelona at the moment, but I wonder if they're hiding something, or if there's another sort of design that they've got in the works that they're not quite ready to show off yet, because apparently they are also going to be bringing some new bits to Bahrain. So we'll see. But at the moment, it looks a bit flaky.
Yeah, certainly does. Right. Moving to the next team after that, we've got the Red Bull sister team is AlphaTauri. Not a great start for Pierre Gasly. I think the first and only driver to crash in this session so far over the 3 days. 308 laps completed for them. I guess that's fine, Tom. But is there anything that we should be worried about, or is that sort of par for the course? That's testing.
I don't think there's too much to be worried about with AlphaTauri, because because testing or not testing as this is, this is the first time that the drivers have driven these cars, and obviously, like we sort of talked about, they are very different to last year's cars. They're a completely different beast. With them sort of twerking down the main straights and all the rest of it, the characteristics are fundamentally quite different. Does it crash once? Yeah, I mean, he did that in 2019 when he jumped into the Red Bull, but this time I don't think there's much to be worried about. He's just finding the limits. You're just seeing how far he can push it. And he pushed it a bit too far. It's a shame that he crashed, obviously, but it's a sort of controlled environment. And as long as it doesn't become a habit of 2022, I was going to say 2021 then, but we're already another year in, I wouldn't be too worried. But they had some pretty solid looking running from what I've seen. Nothing spectacular. From what I've seen, they're just going to sort of go about doing AlphaTauri bits where they just, sort of just go around with sort of good efficiency or the rest of it. They sort of seem to have taken over the void left by Force India, where they seem to sort of do better than they should for a team of their size. I know they're Red Bull quote unquote backed, but it's not like they've got the resources of the main team, is it? Let's be fair. So so seeing sort of Gasly and Tsunoda pushing the car like they do, testing is looking promising. And did you see Tsunoda came out? I think I saw it earlier. I don't know how recently it was actually posted, but he said he reckons Franz Tost was fitter than him last year. It's like, maybe that's not something you should admit, kid. It's like, you're supposed to be an athlete. He's got a lot to learn on what to say and when not to say it, and that's coming from me. I read that and I instantly thought, Lord Hamill will be probably not too pleased with that. Hopefully, that's not a sign of things to come, and hopefully, it's just perhaps Gasly getting rid of some of the cobwebs, or maybe sort of burning off some of the final piece and blankets from Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, if Yuki Tsunoda's Instagram account is anything to go by, I think he's probably in a lot better position than he was last year, judging by that. Also, I love the use of twerking instead of porpoising. That's like that's a Formula One for the Vine generation, that is. After that, we've got one of the teams that did no afternoon running on Friday, Aston Martin. 296 laps is pretty respectable. It's pretty respectable, bearing in mind the amount of running they actually had, Aaron, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a bit more than maybe they would have hoped for, considering they missed an entire afternoon after Seb's oil leak. Although we did see fireman Seb make a return, which was pretty cool. Again, it was a fairly quiet sort of test for Aston Martin. Vettel was 5th fastest for what it's worth. No, that's 6th fastest for what it's worth on day 1 and day 2, actually, just checking my notes. And then Friday, he was 5th fastest. So there is seemingly some pace in the car. Of course, they had the oil leak. So, I mean, that's beneficial because you need something to go wrong, because then you can get across how to fix it and just your processes for that, because the Mercedes engine has been repackaged for this year, and that is quite important. But yeah, the car looks good on track. It looks better with the light green stripe than it does with the pink. I think they're about where they were last year. But again, like with McLaren, there's not been too much going on. So first of all, you can't read too much into the first test anyway, because they're all sussing out their new machines, and anything you do find, you're going to be trying to cover up and sort of keep a wrap on things. But also, they're just trying to work out what they've got, and they've got to build a platform of what they're doing. And in the end, they're freestyling it, unlike Lawrence Stroll's speeches, which are completely scripted. So it's not all doom and gloom for Aston Martin, and I think we'd have heard again if there was something going wrong. But maybe they're all just playing coy, and everyone just wants to keep their cards close to their chest. I think Aston Martin are one to look out for, though, because I just have a feeling that they've got something right. That this car, it looks good, so I'm really hoping it is good.
Yeah, with the Aston Martin, it's almost like if they gave points out for the livery, we'd have them winning the championship. Speaking of cars that look good, we've got the Williams. I personally am a little concerned, Steve, because it's 274 laps, which is the fourth lowest of any of the teams. And as far as I can tell, Williams didn't seem to have any issues, any technical issues, any crashes or anything like that. Is this just, is this a case of them getting everything done very efficiently, or is it just that they couldn't run the car at all?
I've got a completely different completed laps figure to you.
Oh, you know what?
I've got 347.
Well, that's even better. So I don't, 347 for Williams.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, we'll split it down the middle.
Hold on, I'll borrow it. Hold on, I'll go find it. Carry on.
No worries. Firstly,
I don't know where I got that. I think the race must be wrong then, because
it might be day 2 figures that they've got there.
May well be.
They've done that, but they've done that before. But that's fine. Well, firstly, I just want to say a big old "I told you so" regarding the side pods. That's exactly what they're doing, I reckon. So if you didn't listen to last episode when we were talking about the second lot of car reveals, we had a bit of a chat around the side pods on the Williams and just the mysterious fact that we didn't see any sort of rear or side-on shots, and there was a very blurry photo of the Williams with some holes in the side pods. There are indeed dim holes, and I think they're doing exactly what I thought, which is actually sending very deliberate air down onto the upper floor and probably under the beam wing, I'd say, because they want to avoid sort of hot air or dirty air going through there. But yeah, it's been a pretty tidy run plan for them. Both Alex and Nick seem quite happy. They were actually on to performance optimizations by day 2, which is really good. So they obviously got the car properly dialed in day 1. Obviously, the porpoising effect hit them just as much as it did everyone else. I don't think it was too bad for Williams, but that'll be more down to suspension particulars and that sort of thing. I think the porpoising issue is actually affecting cars with pull rod front more so than cars with push rod front. That was just something I did notice in general. Especially the Red Bull, it looked pretty horrendous at one point, and I think on the Ferrari as well, although that might be push rod, so I probably don't know what I'm talking about. But Williams's run plan seemed to go really without a hitch. I mean, they were bang in the middle in terms of laps completed overall across the 3 days. Alex Albon said that the car just sort of behaves. There's nothing sort of untoward in terms of its driving characteristics, which they haven't sort of, which they didn't expect, besides the porpoising. And Nick's feedback was basically the same. This is reassuring to me. It's nice to see them just get through a run plan with no drama, no sort of major, episodes or anything. I don't think they had a single unexpected stoppage from memory. So it's looking quite good for Williams so far. Where they stand in terms of the grand scheme of things, don't know. It's testing, so it's not representative. They were on, everyone on day 3 was doing what looked to be qualifying simulations, but they were always backing off in the third sector just to, hide any sort of performance. But Williams looked decent. It's definitely better in sort of mid to high speed sections. Barcelona Sector 3 is probably the best representation of what cars will perform like in the third, and in slow speed corners, especially through that chicane. And we didn't really get any representative quality runs through there because they all backed off. But the Williams looked good through the second sector, which is majority of which is mid to high speed corners. And good test. See what they bring in Bahrain. I think they're quite happy with the car by the sounds of it, so I wouldn't expect it to look too different. But again, we may see some convergence of design between here and Bahrain, because obviously the cars all do look quite different to each other. So I'm expecting some teams, maybe Williams as well, to have a look at somebody else's front wing or particulars of suspension or that sort of thing and say, yeah, we might give that a go and see what happens. So yeah, I'm just happy that we're not sitting here, talking about their car blowing up or falling off the track or that sort of thing. It's been a tidy session.
Yeah, the biggest mistakes regarding Williams apparently come from my mouth when I got their lap count wrong. We have the fun task of the final two now. We'll start with the less bad one. Alfa Romeo, 176 laps. As far as I could tell, they were limited to just 10 laps apparently of intermediate running in day 3, but 55 laps for Valtteri Bottas and 112 laps for Guan Yu Zhou. Is that enough time, Tom, for those two drivers to have got a hold of the car? Bearing in mind that's a brand new team that they're both stepping into.
No, it's not. Oh, fuck me, Bottas can't catch a break, can he? Yeah. I mean, what can you really say? I legit just don't have anything to add. I mean, yeah, there's just. I was hoping for a bit of a big change from Alfa Romeo this year, because with it being new regulations, Kimi was past his sell-by date, and Antonio, as nice as he was, I think his time was up in F1. I think he showed too little, too late. With Bottas coming, having spent the best part of 5 years at Mercedes alongside Hamilton, I was hoping to see. Well, I'm hoping to see something. Him bring some wisdom, and obviously we don't know what he's doing behind the scenes to sort of impart some wisdom upon the team. Guan Yu Zhou, yeah, whatever. He brings money ultimately. He never really set the world alight in F2. So, not expecting to see an awful lot from him. But it's not looking good for them for this season if testing is anything to go by. Now, obviously, not testing, whatever they got it. Oh, I don't care, it's testing, right? I struggle to see how Alfa Romeo are going to keep their involvement in F1 if this is how things are going to continue. Because why would they continue to pump all this money into the team for them to trundle around in towards the back of the grid like they did last year and the year before? I just don't know. There was nothing from testing really that sort of made me, or whatever is fake testing that made me go, oh, they might be looking at sort of like regular Q2 knocking on the door of Q3, a bit like George Russell last year. I didn't get that. I didn't see that. I didn't see anything from them that made me go, oh yeah, I'm going to shit rainbows, because it looks like they're finally on the up. I want to see them on the up. I just want to see, every F1 fan's dream probably is to see, sort of like more, sort of like see competition up and down the grid. But we're never going to get that, because F1 is not a spec series. As much as they're trying to sort of head it that way, that's not going to happen. And unfortunately, Alfa Romeo, unless they're working on some absolute like magic wizardry shit behind the scenes that we're not privy to at the moment, if they rock up to Barcelona, doing a Racing Point 2020, then perhaps, but I'm struggling to see anything else at the moment.
Yeah, with mechanical issues, apparently, mechanical failures on a number of days, it's almost like they need to change the units of their CAD software back to what they should be. That's my take on it. It's like you say, it's really bad. It's a really bad start, and things only get harder from here. Next, I'm going to throw this more open to the floor. Obviously, we're recording this on the 26th of February. I only say that because I think that's important based on how quickly the situation is moving, and basically how much it could have changed in the meantime between this going out, being recorded and this going out. Obviously, it should be fairly well publicised by this point that Russia has ordered the invasion of Ukraine. The team that has furthest reaching effects on is Haas. And I want to kind of throw this open a bit more to the floor because I know that I'm not particularly knowledgeable about it. But my understanding is that Eurocali has obviously been, as we saw in the last part of testing, has been stripped off of Haas's car, as has the Russian flag. And there could potentially be issues with payments from their major sponsor Eurocali and visa issues for Nikita Mazepin. Look, if anyone's got any more information or a better understanding of the situation than I do, then please come forward, because what are the implications of this, really? I think is the question I'm asking.
I think the bigger question here is what's going to happen to Haas. And I think we should probably steer the conversation that way. I'm not making light of the situation at all. Far from it. The only reason I say we should steer the conversation away is because I don't want to drag this into a political deluge. And like you said, Owain, it's a very, very complex and fast evolving situation. So regarding Haas themselves, you said obviously they've dropped the Eurocali branding. We saw pictures of the team overnight peeling the stickers off the trucks, and they've redone the livery on the car. I say redone. I prefer it without the livery. I think it actually is quite nice because it doesn't look as busy. And it also confirms everything we knew last year because now that they changed the front wing to have just plain white, what happened to it being the colours of the American flag as well? Spin me the other one, hun, come on. But regarding the actual funding of the team, because obviously Eurocali brings a lot of money to sport in general, and obviously they are the title sponsor of Haas. I'm going to use the present tense because I haven't heard confirmation that they are not at the moment. Again, chaps, if any of you knew different, please correct me, because the last thing I want to do is spread false information. But one rumour I have heard, now, obviously we know what F1 is like for Chinese whispers, and this is probably started by Bernie Ecclestone or someone. If Mazepin can't race, and due to visa issues, which I would not be surprised in the least if that happens, given the global tensions, the political tensions. If you can't race, that means that the Eurocali backing will effectively go, which I think will happen, and to be honest, I think should happen. Not for the reason that they are a Russian company, for the reason that they are so closely entwined with the individual who is orchestrating this invasion. That's the reason I think they should go. It's not just because it's like, Russian company means they're automatically bad. No, it doesn't mean that. And Mazepin put out a very good statement where he said he is aware of what's going on. And he basically says, please don't take it out on me. And he's absolutely right, because it's nothing to do with it. It's just unfortunate that he is from a country where this is happening. So again, going back to Haas, I've heard a rumor that Haas are going to be having a meeting with 1&1, who are the German. Mick Schumacher brings them in because they're a big German IT company. As some people will probably know already. I've heard rumors that 1&1 are going to be becoming possibly the title sponsor of the team, and then featuring obviously a lot more prevalent branding. So instead of seeing Eurocali Haas F1 team, we could be seeing 1&1 Haas F1 team. But that also leaves a question over the second seats. And I just want to throw something out there. We saw last year about Mario Andretti and Michael Andretti trying to get into Formula One. And we saw a thing recently where they've officially submitted a bid to enter a team into the sport. It costs, 200 odd million to even get a team into F1 before you factor in all the other costs. Whereas there's an American team here that's already got facilities, it's already got staff, it's already got the infrastructure, it's already got everything you need to run an F1 team, apart from a good second driver. And it means he wouldn't have to wait until 2024 until he can enter a team. So
if the FIA let him in or not.
Yeah, exactly. If the FIA even let him in at all. So would Andretti maybe join forces with Gene Haas and then sort of bring Haas to become like the Haas Andretti F1 team?
It's quite an interesting proposition you make there, Tom, and that could be the opportunity that Andretti are looking for, because they're staring at this sort of wall trying to get into Formula One. There's a $200 million entry fee, and there's all this other stuff that Formula One just isn't looking for another competitor at the moment. It could be the open door that they need to sort of barge in and say, "Hi guys, we're here." So it is a bit of an opportunity, but I'm not sure I see Gene Haas taking them up on it. Even though the Haas team could probably do with the extra bit of funding, although from what I've heard and read, the Uralkali is not that. Well, I say not that much of influential backer. Obviously, it's the title sponsor, but they only give maybe 20-30% of budget, which is about $30 million. So it is a tricky situation, and that they've done the right thing in taking the branding off the car, because you're seeing across sport they're distancing themselves from anything to do with Russia. Like the Polish football team are supposed to be playing Russia in the World Cup qualifiers next month, and they've decided they don't want to play them. And the Chelsea owner is Russian, and he's handing the club into the care of people within the club because he, for various reasons, I'm guessing he can't do anything with it. So Formula One has to be very careful about how they police this. And if someone sniffs an opportunity, they have to be careful that doesn't get spun the wrong way, which it could do.
Just with the Andretti buying Haas side of things, he's tried to apparently millions of times, and a quote from Michael Andretti directly is, "He's a funny dude, hard to read. He could get sick of it. I don't know." So I'm assuming that's in relation to the multiple attempts to buy the team. As much as I'd like to see Andretti in Formula One, I'd like to see them as a standalone, like brand new venture. We've not had that for a very long time, just as an aside. But like this year, we're sort of locking in the power unit regulations for the next, 3 years, 4 years? It's quite a long time.
2025, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next, so after this year, it'll be, 3 years of locked in engine regulations. That car currently has a Ferrari power unit. Trying to squeeze a Renault power unit into something that's not ultimately designed for, it could work. Like McLaren obviously did it, shoehorning a Mercedes power unit into the back of their car last year when it was designed for Renault. So, it's not entirely out of the question, but yeah, just with the overall situation, firstly, this is the ultimate definition, I think, in sport of a team that just keeps getting punched down on. This was meant to be the year where they were going to sort of, get their shit together basically and start making headway towards, getting back into at least the midfield. And I wasn't really expecting anything much more from them than that. But yeah, at the moment, it's not looking fantastic. I don't think Haas will disappear completely. They are going to have to juggle something in terms of title sponsorship money, basically, very, very quickly. If I'm honest, I think the Uralkali Mazepin contracts have been dissolved already. They pulled Mazepin out of all media duties on Friday very quickly. They pulled Günther Steiner away from media duties for Friday as well. I think that's possibly just so those two can actually go and actually sort this out. But I think Mazepin's drive on, when was it, Friday, I think, when he got a handful of laps, I think that's the last time he's going to be in a Formula One car, at least for the immediate future. Just what you guys said as well about Formula One having to be very careful with policing this. I think there's only one way to do it, and that is, unfortunately, to not allow Mazepin to race. And it's weird because a year ago we were saying Mazepin shouldn't be in Formula One in the first place, and in some regards I still think that's correct. I think what he did, and we won't go into it because it's already been spoken about, I think that was an indication at the time that he might not be the right sort of character that Formula One need. At the moment, I feel for the guy a little, because he did, in all honesty, keep his head down for the most part last year. He did do his very best in a car that was frankly rubbish, and that's I was just hoping for a wee bit more for both him and Mick this year, and it's all looking a little bit sketchy. But yeah, whether one and one step up as a title sponsor, that would be great. One thing I did have pop into my head very briefly is we saw the renders last year of a German flag themed Haas. So it was black with the red and white stripes where the Russian flag was. on the livery, and that looked great. So there's opportunity for them to do that if a German company take over as title sponsor. But that's just a nice to have, I suppose. At the moment, they've got quite a bit of work to do off track. This is a very, very tricky situation, and it's not one that really falls under the team's control. They're just going to have to do not what the FIA says, but what the FIA recommends. And I imagine there will be some very strong recommendations coming from the FIA. I mean, there are articles in the International Sporting Code around Appendix L. I'm having a look at it right now. International driver's licenses, medical examinations, drivers, equipment, and conduct. Now, the conduct thing isn't really falling on Mazepin directly, but he is a representative of the country that he's from, even though he's technically not allowed to be because of the anti-doping side of things. But this is a really tricky situation. I don't think we've had anything like this before in Formula One. I think last major sort of driver conduct thing was probably Bertrand Gachot when he famously maced a taxi driver in London. But I'm trying to think of any other instance that remotely resembles this in any form of motorsport, and I honestly can't, because we have not had two independent sovereign nations at war for a very long time, and it's bloody sad.
There is something I can throw in for you, Steve. Sorry to interrupt, but I think it was in 1992 in the European Football Championship. I think it was Yugoslavia were supposed to be in the tournament, but then they were at war.
Oh,
they got thrown out, and Denmark took their place and went on to win the tournament. So we might have not necessarily getting people thrown out, but when you say about Mazepin not being at fault for any of this, and I think he's handled it pretty much as well as he possibly can do.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a case of he or the team standing him down almost for his own benefit, because otherwise he's just going to be there in the firing line and people are already negative towards him. So it might be his own benefit to be out of the firing line.
And we've seen the toxic side of the Formula One fan base very recently with the Abu Dhabi controversy and that sort of thing. And whilst that was a weird old time, people took that far too extreme. And yeah, you're spot on. I think people could make this very much personal towards Mazepin because that's just what some people do. The other side of it, Tom, I think you mentioned regarding the funding, that just simply won't happen. So Russia's been, I think they are now locked out of SWIFT, which is an international transaction service.
I believe so. Yeah, the Hungarians, I think, changed their opinion on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that in itself is going to make any sort of international monetary transfers quite difficult. Vast majority of Russian-owned accounts offshore from Russia, so held with European banks and that sort of thing, and being in the process of being frozen, or already are. If you're a Russian citizen trying to travel, that's basically impossible now. So you can imagine what it would be like for any sort of team, like not team personnel, but I mean, there may be some Russian team personnel as well who are sort of in the firing line for this, and it's no fault of their own. But that's the thing. At the end of the day, this affects the incomes of 500 odd people who really have no choice. The whole future of the team is a little bit up in the air, although I think they'll be okay provided that they can get some sort of title sponsorship. Yeah, it's weird. It's a really weird time.
Yeah, just to sum up, I want to take this opportunity. I think, as you guys have said, this isn't Nikita Mazepin's fault that he's kind of, I think, more than likely to lose his seat. But as we've said, with the visa issues and things like that, and the banking issues now, I think it's important to say to exercise kindness to any Russian people that you may actually know and come across, bearing in mind that, as has been shown with the incredible and I think very, very brave protests within Russia that we've seen footage of, this is, by the looks of things, without getting too political on it, actions from the top rather than from the entire Russian population, both in their own country and those that live elsewhere. So, I think it's important to just make the point, exercise a little kindness and understanding on this one. But Nikita Mazepin is sort of the high profile version, the high profile sort of example of that. And how it can affect people.
If I can add to that, Owen, sorry.
Yeah, go nuts.
Also on the exercising kindness, but make sure people are looking in the right places for their news sources. Like, watch the TV for the news. Go on your news websites like BBC or Sky Or if you want something that's like Formula One related, go to Sky Sports F1, go to the race, go to F1 Chronicle. There'll be something there that's written by people who know what's going on and have contacts, rather than looking on social media where you get idiots who put ridiculous pictures quoting ridiculous things, and that then just fuels the fire. So make sure you're looking in the right places for what you want to know.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Objectivity, try and get as many sources as you can from, reliable sources, and, just to keep a hold of this issue and what's going on in the world. I mean, that's a good advice for life, but I mean,
just to what people who wear tinfoil hats will make you believe, mainstream media is actually fairly reliable when it comes to most things, rather than social media and hearsay and whispers. And my friend at the supermarket knows somebody who works down the road at a laundry that, this bloke's done that or whatever. So yeah, definitely just echoing what Aaron said, like use due diligence and common sense when it comes to information.
100%. Just to round that off with Haas's on-track issues, bearing in mind that there were actually some quite interesting technical developments, I saw at least, with, don't know how legal they were, but the detached shark fin and cooling louvers on the rear of the car. I think, that it's clear that they've put in a lot of work over the time that they've had, which is why it was annoying and unfortunate to see things like cooling leaks, damaged floors, fuel pump issues affect Haas's running. Because as much as they're the whipping boy of F1, as it were, we don't want to see them running around the back, because as has been pointed out, there's 500 people's jobs at risk if they do badly. So yeah, it's just important to keep that in mind. Right. Kind of ended that on a somber note, I guess. But be sure to like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Formula One Grid Talk, and ring the bell icon so you're notified of future shows when they go live or are released. We're available on Verbal, as well as Amazon Music, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Omni Studio, and Pocket Cast. Just search F1 Grid Talk. I will now sort of throw it to the floor. Obviously, we've got with you, Steve. Where can we find you? Where can we find what you do?
So Formula Shakedown, which is on Facebook. So basically just look us up. And if you like open wheel stuff, so it is obviously mainly Formula One, but there's other stuff on there as well. So we look at the feeder series and all your grassroots series like Formula V and that sort of thing. And also S5000, which if you're Australian or from the other bit next to Australia that people get confused for Australia as a state of Australia or somewhere in Europe a lot. It's basically it's the old Tasman series. So these are now spec. I can't remember who builds the chassis. I think they're built by Dallara actually. And they have, I don't want to get it wrong. I think it's a Coyote V8 in the back. They sound incredible, and basically it's a spec open wheel series that's kicked off in Australia. Looks like it'll be expanding into New Zealand as soon as pandemic sort of situation allows, which will hopefully be sooner rather than later. And the races are already also broadcast on YouTube as well, or you can at least catch highlights. So definitely look that up. But look us up. We're basically designed as a page to or a group to discuss all things open wheel and get away from the toxic side of motorsport, which seems to creep into most social media platforms. So yeah, check us out, and if you like what you see, then join. Tell them I sent you, or don't, because they might not let you in.
Wonderfully said. Aaron Harp. Yeah, Aaron, where can we find you?
So I am the host of the 5 Red Lights F1 podcast. So I'll be doing Grand Prix caps after every race. I've been doing this week a new feature called The Flying Lap, where I try and recap everything that happened on track faster than the fastest lap time. So they're pretty short videos. So if you like your news quick, then that's the place to go. You can find me on Twitter at 5_red_lights, on Instagram, 5 Red Lights, and I have a blog which is 5redlights.wixsite.com/5RL pod blog, I think.
I was going to say that that recap in the fastest lap time, that sounds quite difficult with someone like, Austria.
Yeah, it can be done quickly, but I think the first time I ran over, but I'm getting better.
And Tom, where can we find you?
Yeah, so I am part of Everything F1. You can find us on all your social media platforms with handle @joinEF1. So that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We have a Facebook group as well, which is the Everything F1 Paddock. We have a YouTube channel, which is growing, which is Everything F1. Find us on our websites, everythingf1.com. And also we have our weekly podcast, which is the Everything F1 podcast, which is on all your favorite podcasting platforms.
Thank you very much. And if for some reason you want to hear me talk, but in text form, I do a meme roundup of almost every Grand Prix. We've got almost all of the ones for the 2021 Grand Prix, 2021 races. A bit lighter, just a bit more of a sort of internet savvy look, I guess. Try and take some of the conjecture out of it, and just laugh at both sides of the particular arguments that happen to be going down in Formula One this week. So yeah, that's available on sportlightpro.com, and check out obviously all the other Formula One content we've got on there. So as with regards to the podcast, we've got a large back catalogue of shows. It's over 165, I want to say. Yeah, 165 episodes now, including interviews with Mario Isola with Pirelli. Apparently, they're very happy with their new tyres. Apparently, the new tyres are very, very promising, as well as retrospective pieces on Tiregate and Senna. And if you're still stuck for what to do between shows, check out our subreddit F1 Grid Talk to give us suggestions for what we can do to improve the show, and perhaps subscribe to our Patreon for Mike's bikes, Mike's lights, and better recording equipment for our presenters. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.